Hey everybody, so my name is Sonny. I'm an engineer here at NWR. I'm going to work you guys through just some basics of light baking today. I sort of want to run this as much or as close to a Q&A as we possibly can. I don't have like a whole giant like plan laid out. This is sort of a last minute fill in for me to take this over. So I'm going to walk you through like how to do basic light baking on just a simple plane and some textures. And then anytime you have any questions, please like shout out, stop me, and we'll just go from there and try to make it as interactive as possible with you guys. Cool. Let me share my screen. Okay, cool. You guys all see my my Blender screen? I'm over near the stage. I don't know if you guys. I heard somebody ask where I am. I'm right near the stage. There's the big pod over here. But you should see my screen throughout the space. Cool. All right, so yeah. If anybody plans to follow along, now would be a good time to open up Blender and get their computer ready to follow along with this. And we're going to set the basic scene and then bake the lighting, and we'll go from there. So I'll give you guys a minute or so to open up Blender if you're going to do that. While that's happening, I'm going to start setting up the basics of a scene, and you guys should be able to follow along after. It doesn't really matter what you put in your scene, the light baking part of it should be applicable across the board. So I'm just going to create or make this cube into a more of a plane. Actually, I'll delete it and add a plane. I'm going to scale this plane up to like, I don't know, by a degree of 100. Just so we have a nice big plane here with no texture on it. And then I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go find some good texture that we can use for a ground texture. We'll use that I usually use Polyhaven. You can use whatever your favorite texture / HDRI website is. But I'll go in here and we'll grab some textures that will look good on the ground. So maybe we'll try like a forest floor. So we want to download, I'll stick with 4K, but this is going to be highly dependent on what your use case is for NWR. You either probably don't want to go 4K textures unless it's like needed and there's not a lot of them. So I'll download the 2K and we do that. And I don't want the whole blend. I just want the zip. So we can choose all the different files I want in here, and we'll take them all. We can get rid of that. We'll just take our actual textures here. So we'll download that into our, wherever you want to download them really, but I'm gonna throw it in my downloads folder. And when that's done, we'll be able to apply this texture to our plane here in Blender. Cool. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to make sure we go into edit mode, hit U, and unwrap our model so it has UVs. And then I want to go into our UV editing tab. Our shading tab. And in here is where we're going to start messing with our actual shaders and add some textures. So we'll use a node system and a principal BDSF shader over here. And then all we have to do is drag in our texture that we just downloaded. So if we go in here, we can go and grab this displacement map. Yeah, you have somebody have a question? Or not? All right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag in my diffusion map, which will be just the colors. Why didn't that come through? I'll have to extract them first. Let me go ahead and do that. It'll take a second. Sure. Yeah, I went to a website called Polyhaven. They have quite a few different assets that are available for free. You can get HDRIs, which can be turned into skyboxes and can be used in nowhere. You can get textures that are usually photo scans, but they can be other ones. And then you can get also models from here as well, and you can use those directly in your scenes. So if you go to like the textures, you can click through all these and pick the ones that you want, really. You can use these in any of your projects. I can drop the link in the chat. I'll pin it above my head for now. Cool. So now that we're back in Blender and our textures are unzipped, I can take my maps, so my diffusion map right here, and now we have this inside of our node tree. So if I connect the color tab or little ball to the base color here, you'll see now we have our texture showing up on our plane. And this is a really large plane, and the texture is very stretched. So we probably want to repeat this over and over again so it looks a little more natural. And you can do that one of two ways. You can either add some like math nodes over here that will repeat your texture over again, or you can just come over to your UV editing tab. Make sure you have all of your UV selected over here, your whole UV map, and then just scale it up. So if we scale it up by like 100, you'll see it's going to start overflowing. And it can come down here and you see like a repeating texture. That might be too much, but for now it will serve its purpose, and we can start baking light on top of that. Yeah, does somebody have a question? I heard something. No? Okay. Cool. So repeating textures like this can complicate things for baking light. And there's sort of two trains of thought in how you want to do this. If we're just trying to bake shadows, you can repeat textures like this. But if you're going to bake directly onto the texture, which we're going to do right here, in hindsight, maybe I shouldn't have stretched those out, considering you're going to see that baked texture repeated over and over again, and it's not going to look seamless anymore. So that's something definitely to be aware of. So I'm just going to Control Z that a few times and get this back here. And then I'll scale this down so we have a smaller area to work with. And then we'll add a model on top and we'll light it and we'll get some shadows. So the next step is we want to actually add something on top of this that will create a shadow, which we can then bake that lighting into the texture itself of this leaf ground. So in order to do that, I'm going to go over here. I'm just going to search Sketchfab for some sort of asset. So oh, that's annoying. There we go. So if I want to maybe find a chair or a sign or like a wet floor sign could be cool. Something that will cause, a unique shadow. Let's just look for a chair. And we can look through some of the options we have here. And this looks like a cool old rustic chair. And I'll just import this model and we'll be able to start using it. So now we have this chair here. We want to make sure it's positioned somewhere on the forest floor. Yep. Somebody have a question? We need a raise hand feature. No? All right. So now we have a chair here. We have, yeah, please. Like, ask any questions you have. Do what? I'm sorry, I'm not understanding what you're saying. What do you want me to do? Oh, how did I pull in the model? So there's a sketch. How did I get the chair here? I'm not 100% what you're trying to say. You want me to show you how I got this chair in, or got the Sketchfab plugin, or how did I move it? What particularly do you want me to show you how to do? or maybe I'm just having a hard time understanding. If you could type it in the chat, it might be easier. Okay. So cool. We have now that we're looking at this, we have a scene that's unlit, and you don't see any shadows here. And if you go over to this mode, you're going to start to see shadows. And this is our lit mode. So what we want to do is be able to have the ground look like this with the shadow of the chair, on this texture, but without actually lighting it using Blender. Because if we were to export this scene and put it in nowhere, you wouldn't see these shadows, because that's not going to be replicated with our lighting. And nowhere we don't do live shadows like that. So all the shadows you're actually seeing in this world right here are baked using a similar technique to this, except I didn't actually bake it on top of the texture because then I couldn't use a repeating texture. And that means you'd lose a ton of resolution, or your file sizes would be bloated like crazy. So there's a little hack to get around that, and you can do a transparent layer that you bake all the shadows on and put that on top, like very, very close to the actual mesh above it, and it looks like shadows. Sort of a little hack, but it's what you got to do to get like file sizes low and keep all these shadows in here while still being able to like multiply or duplicate your texture over and over again. But back for a basic example. Now that we have this here, yeah. Yes. Okay. So we are recommending somewhere below 500,000. It really is a balancing act. You can get more, and I've run scenes with 1 million, but that's not going to be very performant on most devices. We highly recommend to keep it below 500K. But if you have a ton of textures and they're 4K or 8K textures from that photo scan, that's not going to work either. You're going to either have to crunch those textures down and compress them, or if you want to use really high-res textures, you might need to sacrifice in the poly count of the model. On that in particular, I actually have a lot of experience taking photogrammetry models, photo scan models, and preparing them for the web, which means you have to decimate them pretty heavily, but then you can actually rebake the textures from the high-res version of the model onto the low-res version of the model. So you have like a million or 10 million polygon model with all these cool details, and then you simplify it to like 5,000 triangles. And then, but on that 5,000 triangle model, it looks really close to the million polygon one because you're able to transfer all the normals, all of the detail from like the metallic and your specular and your diffuse, and all of that actually gets baked directly onto this new low res mesh. So it's a way to really save on some file size if you're able to go through that process and make that work. And I don't know if I'll be able to get to it today, but like if we do have enough people interested in learning that and how to take photo scan models and prepare them for the web, especially for nowhere, I could definitely walk some people through that at a separate time. But it's a whole lesson in and of itself of how to like decimate, prepare for the web, get your textures ready small enough. I mean, you can make anything work usually, except if you start crashing things on phones, and that's like the major issue is you're gonna run into memory issues on low-end devices, and then that's going to be a problem for us if you start to put in these really, really high-res models. But yeah. Yeah, we recommend below 500,000, and also so we have. Let me find the link to the actual World Builders Guide because there's recommendations in there for your file size limits, and all of those things. So it'll tell you what your recommended polygon count is, how many textures we think you should stay beneath. It'll tell you your actual total file size, right? So if you have less polygons, you might be able to have more textures. If you have less textures, more polygons. But these are general guidelines you want to stay below, and always be mindful to try to be as lean and optimized as possible, no matter what. And like if you can't get it to look the way you want it to look, with bringing it down to whatever 100,000 triangles, 400,000 will probably be okay, but we want to make sure we always do some testing on those just to make sure on lower end devices it doesn't crash. But yeah, long story short, below 500,000 triangles. I'm finding the actual World Builders Guide so I can tell you our official numbers that I've settled on. Let's see. Community built, no. I should have this on bookmark. There it is. The World Builder's Guide, getting started, setting up here, no, optimization, submitting a world. Here it is, important world standards. So we recommend below 50 megabytes. The max triangle count we put here is 1 million, but we recommend you stay below 500K. Max collision meshes, this is a hard one. You can't go above 50,000 triangles for your collision meshes. We start to see real CPU lag there, and if you go above a certain number, it'll literally crash our platform. So that's when you have to stay beneath. And then amount of meshes is another one. So we're balancing draw calls here, which means every time you have a different mesh, different material, they're going to be different draw calls in the system. So if you're using one mesh, but you duplicate it as instances over and over again, and you do that in Blender by clicking Shift D or Alt D instead of just copying and pasting, and that will link them together as the actual same mesh data. So that way, when it's imported into our system, we don't see it as 100 different meshes. We only see it as one. So you can do that, but you're only supposed to have up to 50 unique meshes that aren't instanced together. The same thing for textures is what we recommend, but again, as few as possible to make it look the way you want and function the way you want. And then we've found that 4K textures can sometimes, or they are one of the most significant impacts for lower end devices, especially iPhones, because you have a video memory limit, and those can go past that. So we recommend staying, especially for mobile worlds, below 4K. You can go 4K if you're going to have a desktop version and a mobile version, because we allow you to do that and have two separate versions of the world, one more optimized for mobile than the other. And then we want to go 4 dynamic lights max, which is all we support. So if you try to add more, they just won't work in Blender. So that could be something you run into is you have all these lights and only 4 of them are working when you get into nowhere. Oh, that's like, because that's all we support. You can only use up to 4 dynamic lights, but that's why you have to bake all the rest of your lighting if you want it to be that way. So yeah, this is, I mean, Tanner, did you put a link in the chat or no? No, I got it right now. Got it. And this is where I would refer back to for any sort of file size world building limits. And there's bunches of other tips and tricks in here too. I put together this guide a month or 2 ago. So if you haven't been through it, it's definitely worth reading through for our platform. It assumes you know basic Blender knowledge, but it's a walkthrough of our plugin. All right, back to the task at hand. So what we want to do now is we want to make sure we can get this shadow to show up in our unlit view, right? And one way to go about that is just straight up baking this light into the scene. So we do that by making sure we're in, let's go into Cycles. So Cycles is a much better rendering engine. If you have a lower computer, you might have a hard time running this, but you don't have to have it in Cycles until you do the actual bake. Right now, I'm just in it because I can handle it. But again, Eevee, which is right here, which is, you can see around the edges, the shadows are not as accurate. You have some artifacts, and if you go over to Cycles, it gets a lot more sharp, and you can see it's more realistic in all of those ways. But again, it's ray tracing. It's doing real time ray tracing on your machine. So what we do here is we're gonna make sure we have the mesh we want to bake selected in our 3D viewport. Then we want to go over to our shading tab, and we want to go over here, and we're going to create a new image, like node, right? So if I hit Shift A and I search just image, we're going to create a new image texture. And this node, we have to actually make a blank image that we're going to bake our lighted image onto. So we're going to go ahead and click Create New Image. We want to pick a resolution that's good for us. This initial one was 2K, so we'll go 2048 by 2048 just to stay consistent. I picked 5, not 8. And then we'll title it something just for organization's sake, and we'll call it Leaves Baked. Okay. Once we're done with that, you click OK, and now we have this texture here, which is going to be a black texture, but we're going to end up baking our actual light onto it. So now that we have our plane selected in our 3D viewport, we have, and only the plane selected. We don't want anything other than the plane. We only want the one mesh you're trying to bake bake its material onto. And then we're going to make sure we have our node that we just created selected over here. You're going to go over to your scene tab. Go down to the bake section right here. And then we're going to make sure we're in combined mode. And this is where you can really start to get specific. And you can do just a diffuse. You can do just your roughness, your emit, your environment. But for now, we'll just do a combined one. And we'll take, so if you just do a diffuse, it's going to bake literally just the diffuse texture onto a new mesh. And this is when you do selected to active, which is sort of what I was talking about when you want to bake a really high res mesh onto a low one. You do something like this. We're not going to do that now. We're just going to do a combined one. And we're going to make sure we have our lighting selected and all of our contributions. And these are all configurable, but we can play with those after. And you just click bake. And it'll do its thing. So we'll take a second, and we should be able to then attach this texture to our base color. And in the unlit view, we should see a shadow. So that should take a second. You can see down here in the bottom of the screen. Oh, it's done. So our leaves baked. And as you can see over here on the left, we now have a baked version of this texture. And the shadow is directly on the map. But if we go over here, you don't see it. And that's because our old one is still attached. So now if we just grab my new one, and you can see it change over to the left. The old one, new one. Old one, new one. Baked lighting, no baked lighting. And I grab this color node and I put it in the base color. Now we have the shadow baked on. And if I go back just to our layout mode, this is double rendered, but I can get out of cycles. I can go to Eevee, and I can click on this viewport shading button, which will get rid of the lighting from the Blender scene. But as you can see, we still actually have a shadow and texture here. So we can then still play with our material settings. It looks really shiny, or more shiny than we want it to be. But if we go back to our shading tab, you'll see we only have a base color in there. So we can go ahead and pull down our specular, right? So we don't need the specular because we baked all of that information, the lighting, the specular, all of this that's going to be down here into our diffuse texture. And we want it to show up just like that. Now, another thing to think about is, do you want your baked lighting to actually take lighting, right? Do we want it to be baked with this light, but also be affected by a dynamic light in the scene as well as the skybox, right? Do you want, when you turn a light on in the room, for it to light up and get darker, or do you want it to be lit itself? And that's where you can choose either to keep it as a principled BSDF shader as we have it now. And if you were to go over here, and let's see if we can go to layout, and I'm going to delete this light now. And that can be a good way to show it's working. If I go over here, you can see it's sort of really dark, but you have the shadow still there, and that's because there's no light here in the scene. If we go back here, that's our unlit scene, and it's acting as a background texture right now. You could also make it in your final file to have it come up the same way. So once you have this and you decide, maybe I want this to not be affected by the scene's lighting, I want it to just be as I see it in Blender, I want it to show up in the nowhere world. That's when you can go back to your shading tab, make sure you have the correct thing selected. And then here we can try to add a background shader. So if we just search for background, instead of a principled BSDF, we can take our color, throw it in here, and attach the background tab to our surface. Now, no matter where we are, or what lighting is present on it, you're going to see the same thing. And you can see the chair change color, but the floor doesn't. And that's because it's now a background texture and it's not taking or receiving lighting. So that's one way to look at it there. Does anybody have any questions? No? Not yet? Okay, we have some more time. Let me try to, I'll show you guys the quick trick to bake some shadows onto the scene. And this is, a little bit more complicated in a way. I may have to install software on this computer. But there's a pretty simple method. And Tanner, if you don't want me to do this, you can stop me. And, if we want to continue, all right. So I'll show you guys a method to do this and repeat this texture underneath if we want to. And I'll show you the issue with it right now if we try to do that by going to our UV editing, and you select the plane. Why is this? Edit mode, object mode there. You make sure we select the plane over here. What? That's weird. My UV map isn't showing up as it should. Let me unwrap this. Make sure we have it. Oh, I hadn't had it. Okay, that was my mistake. I didn't have it selected over in the 3D viewport. So when you're in edit mode, if you want to see your UV maps, you have to actually have it selected over here as well. So if I click off of it, you're not going to see it over here. Make sure everything's selected over here by dragging and dropping or clicking the hotkey A. A will just select everything in your scene. If you're in edit mode, it will select everything that's being edited currently. So now that we have this UV over here, you can take it, click, make sure we're selected, and scale it up a ton, right? But now this doesn't look seamless because you have all of this baked lighting on it, which is a problem. So if I go back to our shading tab, we can see that if I connect the old one, it turns seamless or more seamless. You can still obviously see that there's a pattern there, but you're not getting that baked lighting over and over again. This may be not the best example for a texture you want to repeat because of how similar it is, and you can definitely pick it out. But this sand here on the beach that you're all standing on is repeated, and in that instance, it doesn't matter because it's very, very uniform. Somebody can't see. You can't see anything? So, in order to get around this problem, one thing you can do is, let's pull back our principled VSDF shader. Get rid of the background shader for now. So we have this right here, and we're going to want our light back in the scene. So if I add in a light, let's add a spotlight in. That'll be fun. Drag it over, rotate it a little bit, bring it down, bring it over, right in the chair, and then let's bring up its intensity quite a bit, so we can really see a shadow come. We can pull that like that, maybe. Drag it over, perfect. So it has this long, cool shadow, but we don't want that to be baked onto everyone. It would look weird. So what we can do is go ahead and go back to our mode over here. We can see our shadows. And the first thing we want to do is actually duplicate this plane. So I'm going to do that by doing Shift D because there's no need to copy and paste, since we don't want to waste polygons, even though it's only going to be one face. But we'll do it to practice. Shift D. And then I'm going to rename this over here. I'm going to call it Shadow Plane. Right? And now I want to make sure that my shadow plane is slightly, ever so slightly above the normal plane. And we're going to go and we're going to edit the actual shading of our shadow plane rather than our actual plane. And this shadow plane is going to be using a new baked texture. So let's go ahead and click Shift A. And we're going to search for an image texture. We're going to create a new one that's going to be called Baked Shadows. And we're going to keep it 2048 by 2048. And we're going to make it white. Keep the alpha. We're going to make it a white base. And once we have this, we're going to click OK. And we're going to go ahead and click our shadow plane, which we have selected here. Great. We make sure this is selected in our viewport here. And then we go back to our baked lighting tab. And inside, we have to make sure we're in cycles before we actually see it. We make sure our shadow still looks the way we want it to. You're not going to see all those, interesting. You see it, but it's much more like diffused here than it was before. But that's fine. We can go ahead and bake it just like this. And in this instance, we don't actually want to bake everything. We're going to want to go ahead and just bake our shadows, I believe. And once we click on shadow, you're going to be able to see what gets baked onto this new texture. Making sure all my settings are correct. I think we're good. So we'll go ahead and click bake, and hopefully I didn't screw anything up. But what we're gonna get here is we're gonna get a white image with the shadows as the only dark part image. And then I'm gonna go ahead and install a free software called GIMP. It's like a version of Photoshop, but it's free, and it actually has a tool that, and here's the link for it. I'll put it in the messages. It has a specific tool that Photoshop doesn't have, so I have to install it actually so I can use it on my new PC. I don't have it installed on this one yet, so we'll try that real quick. Cool. Done. Sweet. So now that we have baked shadows over here, interesting. We got some weird artifacting, and I don't think that should or turned up the way I wanted it to. That's why. So I want to disconnect the actual texture first. I want to make sure we unwrap this UV. And the thing is, I had my UVs for this plane. If I go back over here, the shadow plane, if I edit it, let's see, select all, go to UV edits. It's way, way bigger. So I don't want that. I'm going to actually have to unwrap this again and just keep it back to right there. Perfect. So now we have the shadow plane on top of this, which is going to have a normal UV map, where the one beneath it over here is going to still be, or should still be stretched. So if I go over here, go back to this, select all, that's still stretched, right? So we're going to go back to the shading tab over here. We're going to bake this again. Make sure that shadow plane is selected here. Make sure our big shadows are selected here, and then bake it again. And that should overwrite what was there. Give that a second. Beautiful. So now you can see over here on this side, you have a much more realistic representation of what should be here. And what we have to do is pull this into GIMP. And we're going to end up replacing this with a version of it that's a PNG and has transparency. So we're going to remove all of the white, I believe, from the scene. And that will give us our shadow map. And if we turn off our shadow plane now, you can see. Did I disconnect this? I must have disconnected it. 1 second. 1 second. Yeah, totally did. And I deleted. Great. I'm going to bring it back. I somehow deleted the node in the wrong one, but I can just bring it back by going through here and finding our forest floor and reconnecting that to the base color. So here's our forest floor, and then our shadow plane on top of it. The shadow plane, yeah, see, I deleted the wrong one. That's fine. Okay, cool. Oh, sometimes I wonder about myself. So I never disconnected the materials. So right now they're sharing materials. I'm wondering why I'm doing one thing and it's screwing up the other. So what happened here is I am sharing the same material, so I have to click this button right here, which will make it a single user material. That way I can edit them separately. So I'll click that and it will make a different copy of the material for me. I'll be able to go over here and make sure we're selected on the plane. I'll add back our image texture. Make sure we select on our forest floor, pull this in here again, like I just did. And then this time when I turn off the shadow plane, we see that beneath it and our shadow plane on top of it. And then if I go over to the shadow plane or actual plane, we don't need our baked shadows anymore. If I go to the shadow plane, we see our baked shadows right here. And we can go ahead and connect that to the color just to see what it would look like. And it's going to give us something like that. But what we really want is more alpha. We need to have the alpha channel as well. So this is when GIMP comes into play. And we'll go ahead and remove the white from the scene. And we'll see what happens there. I'm a little worried about this black outline, but it's probably because there was no other lighting in the scene. And that's just what we're looking at. So let's get rid of this. We'll get rid of this. Go here. And yeah, without any other lighting source, that checks out. So if I go into my GIMP install, it should open up shortly. Maybe not. Okay, there we go. The first thing we need to do is make sure we save it. So if I go to texture paint, this is my baked shadows. I'm just going to go to image, save as, go over to, let's see where I want to put this right now. Let's go to nowhere. All this big shadows, PNG. And then inside GIMP, we're going to want to open up import, and open works as well. And we're going to go to that directory I just saved it in. We're going to open this big shadows PNG. We're going to go to image, or layer, colors. Color to alpha. And we make sure it's white there. And then as you can see, it took out all of the white in this plane. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And we're going to export it. Or see if I can just save it as a, no, I'm going to have to export it. Export as, we'll export it as a PNG, big shadows, and we'll call it transparent. We'll export with default settings, it's fine. And then back in Blender, let's pull open our shadow plane. Let's go ahead and go to our shading tab. And in our shading tab, we're going to click on our plane, it's our shadow plane, shadow plane, beautiful. We're going to drag in that new transparent texture that we just did. And that way we'll be able to use this transparency as an alpha value and render fake shadows on top of everything. So if I go to, let's see, my tutorials tab, and then baked lighting, and then grab the transparent version, we drag that in. You didn't want to do that? Okay, let's try that again. There we go, that worked. And then we'll take this old one. We don't need it anymore, but we'll keep it here just for the hell of it. Take this new one, we'll connect the color to the base color. And then we're going to connect the alpha to the alpha. And now it's a little darker than we want, but that is the gist of how you bake light on top of a repeated texture. And if you had more lighting in the scene to begin with, other than the spotlight, which is right here. Let me change that. So here's our spotlight. If I were to make this a bigger light, and then we'd have light throughout the rest of the scene. That's how I did this for the beach world right here. I literally copied the ground and I brought it up like a centimeter, and I was able to bake all of the shadows directly onto it. And it just knows which values are darker and lighter, and it will bake it correspondingly. So if I go back out of, I go to my layout, and I get out of here, we should, oh, interesting. Unless I screwed something up. We should be able to see it with our new texture. Shadow plane. Unless color goes to alpha 2. Well, I screwed something up, I think, but that's the gist of how you go about doing that. Let me see if I can figure out what I did wrong and why it's not showing up transparent without this view. It takes me a second. While I'm here, I know we're almost out of time. Does anybody have questions that I can answer from like the whole thing as to how baked lighting works specifically in Nowhere? Anything not regarding this hack that I'm showing you right now, because this is sort of a thing nobody does unless you need to. Let's see. Let's get back on the cycles.
Yeah, if no one has.
Oh, see, I figured it out, guys. Okay, I'm just like overthinking things. So the blend mode is opaque. We need to change the blend mode to alpha blend. And this should work. There you go. Small things. So you have to make sure if you're trying to use a transparent texture that you actually allow it to be transparent, which I was not. So the blend mode was set to opaque. Therefore, the alpha values are not going to be coming through. So there you go. Like literally, that's exactly how I expected it to work. I just missed that one step. So now you can see you have shadows on top of this repeated texture beneath it. And the reason everything's all black here, like I said, is because I didn't have any other light in the scene. We only had that spotlight. If we had a sun, you'd get that lighting included in it as well, and the rest of the scene would just be a little bit of a, you'd be able to see it. It wouldn't be pitch black. It would just be lit the way it should correctly be lit. But this is literally how I had it lit over here. So yeah, any questions for me or anything I can answer for anybody? I'm here. I'm not in a rush to get out of here, so I'm not like bumping out at 4. If anybody has questions, I'm down to answer them.
If anyone has questions that come to them later too, I'm dropping a link to our World Builder channel on Discord. This is going to be a great way to reach Sonny and other people who are on our team that can help answer any sort of World Builder related questions you have, particularly for building worlds in Nowhere. But yeah, it's a good place to get some info regarding that.
Yeah. There's a famous donut tutorial on YouTube. and I'll find a link for you. But it's there's this guy, I think he's called Blender Guru. He's very, very good. He puts together very easy, like beginner friendly tutorials for Blender. And the one that I would recommend going through is he makes a donut, and you get to just walk through and follow. I think it's a 17 video playlist. I have the link right here. And if you're like brand new to Blender and you need to like really figure out just the basics of it, listen, I understand how it's very overwhelming at first. There's like the UI is ugly. It's like you have to figure out where everything is. And then most of the time I use shortcuts or hotkeys now. So like I don't even use like the menu. And once you start to figure out what the shortcuts do and everything, it becomes a lot easier to use. One sort of pro tip to realize is if you're in Blender and you click on something and say I click, so right now I'm rotating by holding the middle mouse button. And as I'm doing that, on the bottom of the page down here, you can see these different commands, and they tell you what your hotkeys are depending on what situation you're in. So as I'm dragging, if I want to axis snap, it tells me to hold Alt. So if I hold Alt and then do this, it will snap to axes. See? So if I get close enough to an axis, it will snap to it. Same thing for like, if I hit G, now all on the bottom of the screen, G is for grab, so I can move things around. But now it tells me what I can do next, right? So if I want to just like grab it and move it on the x-axis, I click X next, and now I can move it on the x-axis. And those all stay persistent on the bottom of the screen for you to learn pretty easily of like at least how to control things. And it really depends if you're coming from a 3D background or not. So like if you've used 3D softwares or you play a lot of video games, then you're going to pick it up pretty easily. It's just more of like learning the UI thing. But then like some people that have never touched a 3D product and don't know how to like maneuver their way around a 3D space, especially in a 3D editor, I would take some more getting used to. But again, that donut tutorial is very good, so I would recommend that for any beginners.
Sonny is also being humble. Sonny created a fantastic beginner series of how to build in Nowhere. So I'm also going to be linking to that playlist. Sonny essentially goes through walking a beginner through all of the important parts of the Nowhere plugin and does teach like a lot of the very basic stuff. Yeah, it's up to you on the sort of way that you'd like to learn, but there's a couple different options for getting started.
Totally. I would watch the ones I made if you have some knowledge of Blender or 3D or any sort of, if you've used like Maya or you've used like AutoCAD or any sort of 3D editor in the past, then you could jump right into it. But I think move a little fast if you don't have experience with Blender or other 3D products. And it's mainly focused on how to use our plugin and all the different features that our plugin can do to make Nowhere feature or Nowhere specific things, and less focus like specifically on the fundamentals of Blender. I definitely touch upon them and you'll pick them up. But yeah, two options there. I think both are valid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you go out or reach out on Discord, I should get back to you pretty soon, especially if you like tag my name.